right, another video book review. This one is For the Price of Spring by Daniel Abraham, the fourth in the Long Price Quartet, 4-book series. And yeah, this is recommended by a lot of people nowadays. This was first, I think, I saw recommended by Library of Alexandria. I think Alan, right? Alan is his name. I don't watch much of his stuff, but I did see that, and a lot of people reference him as the guy who kind of introduced this series to the booktube space, fantasy, whatever, space. And I must say, this series grew on me. This series really did grow on me. If you saw my video reviews for the first book, I was kind of lukewarm about it. I was like, it was all right. Second book, I was like, all right, it's better. A lot more political intrigue. Things were happening. You know, I got more interested in the characters being adults. You know, that was good. It got better. The third book, absolute, pretty much almost a banger, but it was really, really good. It was like more like a war novel-ish, but it was not too much of a war, but it felt light for what that was, but it had a lot of other things going for it, but it felt light on. This book was, I feel like, the cherry on top. It was the absolute best of the series. Everyone is saying that the third book is the best, but I think this book definitely outpaces that one and all the others, for a lot of reasons, actually. What this series goes for is, if you haven't read it or whatever, this kind of jumps every book 14, 15 years in between each book. You start when they're kind of young, 18 to 20 years old, our main characters. Then you jump another 15 years after that. And now this book, they're definitely getting to their elderly stage in their life, right? I think they're in maybe their 60s in this book, mid to late 60s, I think. And I really love that. You don't get enough of that. And all this weight that's behind them that you've experienced with them, a lot of it, right? There's stuff, like I mentioned in the last book, there are things that happen off screen, off page. That's what I thought also lessened the impact of a lot of these books. But I felt like this book focused on the events that happened that we saw during all those previous books and all the previous decades of their lives. So that lent a lot of weight to what was happening that I felt like was missing for that kind of emotional punch. So this book had that. You had the characters, you know, shaped so much by their past and by everything that's happened, to the point where it shaped everything that they thought, shaped how they interacted with the world, how they thought of the world, how, you know, two different major things, the same thing can be seen by, you know, two separate ways. Like the third book, the end of that completely set up and changed the world like crazy, and this book is really dealing with the impact of that, right? So, you know, kind of a spoiler, right? But at the end of that book, it made one empire, big empire. It made what was it? Yeah, it made the men, you know, not be able to have children, but the women could, and it made the women of the Kime, it made them infertile. So now the world has to deal with that, and Oda Machi is trying to, you know, say, okay, this is terrible, but, you know, our empire needs to continue, and their empire, the only way we can do that is maybe try to convince them, you know, to send us men, and send us women, we'll send them men, try to, you know, make that dance. And we start the story with Oda being the emperor, really, of all these fallen cities, trying to piece themselves back together, but not having any kids. So that's really rough, and trying to, you know, get some kind of thing going, and with the Galts, trying to get them to, who are the enemy, who caused like a whole lot of death, trying to figure this out, and having his own people, you know, kind of split on this, because they're like, why would we get in bed with the enemy? Why would we let this happen? So there's big issues there, but he's just trying to further his people, get an actual future going on. So you can see that there logically. But if you go to the Galts, or not the Galts, sorry, if you go to Maddie, he is a huge cause of this, obviously, and he sees it the other way. And same with Oda's daughter, sees it as selling out the women who have had their fertility taken from them, right? And not trying to fix it, you know, trying to get poets back in the world or fixing it, but just giving up and selling off the importance of their women off, and now just replacing their women with Galt women. So there's a whole major issue there, and a lot of people have different problems with this, but the thought process between that is just incredible. Like the struggle between these characters and how they view it is incredibly shaped by their past, and how they were the cause of this in a lot of ways, and how it's affected them. And Mahdi is setting up a school. Really, he's setting up a new school with new poets, and that is obviously super frowned upon. And you have Oda trying to broker a peace with the Galts, and a lasting peace, and combining families and all this. So there's that. And yeah, the world just is different every single book, and I loved how different it was in here. And you have all our returning characters, who have made it this far, and having them, the weight of the world and of the past kind of resting on their shoulders. And you have multi-generational, kids and people who've grown up in the world that we've seen being developed. And it's incredible, the I guess the depth of this, the last like 80 years or whatever, that we are 65, 70 years of this world that we've been following, and having it feel real. And the dialogue itself feels so real, like the communication people have, like the pauses that people have, and the someone speaking but maybe someone not replying because they're distracted, or they're thinking of something and then saying something else that seems like a non sequitur but is clear that it is about something else. And it's very interesting how the dialogue is done, makes it very realistic, and I really like that as well. Yeah, I loved it. I loved it in that sense, and the moral struggles that are happening in this book feel like actual struggles. I mentioned other books, like the kind of the moral and the thematic struggles that are going on, that the readers are supposed to be contending with, don't feel very weighty. This one does, and even though I came down on one side over the other pretty early on, it didn't lessen it was like when I read Crime and Punishment, where I really I understood my position, and then this other position that kept being pushed forward and wanting me to think about it, I just didn't care enough about that, which lessened the impact of that book. This book, it didn't. It really worked. So I don't know how that difference occurred, but I feel like just maybe the issue itself was more complex, and more, it felt meatier, like something that I'd actually chew on, and I did. Yeah, so that was good. The ending felt realistic. You don't have happy endings here really in this story too much. You have as happy of an ending as you're going to get here, but it's all much more realistic, and compromises everywhere. Everywhere's a compromise. So it just felt, it felt mature. It felt like a grown-up series. And while the first book, looking back at it, might be better than I remember, it's still I didn't like where I was beginning of someone's journey in adulthood, and the kind of the weird love triangle. The poet stuff was super interesting, but the characters themselves, I felt like that was useful to have for all these later books, but as a first book, it didn't really interest me as much. But as we moved on, it just gets better and better. So don't be disheartened if the first book you bounced off of, that just really, really gets better. I think this, again, was my favorite book of the series. I really loved the book. I would definitely recommend it, and definitely the previous book are just fantastic. Kind of a fantastic double read. You'd have double story, double duology, right? You need the other twos, but the other two books, but this set is really great. Yeah, I would give this book, honestly, like a 9 out of 10. It was just so good. So almost great, maybe great as I think about it. Definitely on my top 10 so far of the year. I might not even read 10 books so far, but it's, so far this year has been an absolute banger of a year, minus a few duds. And you'll see in my videos I release which ones were duds or not, and you'll definitely see by the end when I have my list up. It's going to be surprising some of these books that are going to be duds that I really did not like. But anyways, that's it. That's the book review. Excited to continue reading. They're such bite-sized reads too. They're like 4 or 5 hour reads if you were to read it straight all the way through, and they pack so much of a punch. It's just so great. Anyways, can't stop talking about these books. Do enjoy them, and please read them. They're just great. All right, on to the next book.